Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody, and this is a new music biopic from director Kasi Lemmons, and starring Naomi Ackie, who plays Whitney Houston in this film. And this 2.5-hour biopic is something else. There's a lot to this, and yet not enough in an odd way. I feel like this film really starts to lean into those tropes of, here's a biopic. This is from one of the screenwriters of Bohemian Rhapsody, and it feels it, because basically this just feels like all the greatest hits of Whitney Houston. You get real excited whenever she does like full performances of her songs because they're great. And Ackie does a fantastic job portraying Whitney Houston, and her up there lip-syncing to Whitney's singing is great, and you get engaged in it, and you're like, oh, this is great. It distracts you from the fact that this film never digs deep enough into the different aspects of her life. It plays off a lot of beats in very familiar ways that we've seen plenty of times over and over and over and over again. And honestly, by the end, I was just gassed. And there's a really great performance that she was giving that takes up like the last 10 minutes of this movie, and you're just like, oh, I'm done. Can't take anymore. And it's just too much. It's really trying to lean on, let's play that song, and people will love it because it's great. And you know, Bohemian Rhapsody did the same thing with the Live Aid concert. Like, that whole last chunk of the film was really energetic and great because it's just Queen performing. And similar to that, oddly enough, this is not from the same director. This is not Bryan Singer or Dexter Fletcher, but Lemmons utilizes big stadium sequences with horrible CGI that look so artificial and terrible looking crowds. And they had the Super Bowl sequence that leaned so heavily on like the fighter jets above, and it looked really cheap and took you right out of the film. It should have taken some other approach to showing Whitney performing without having to lean so heavily onto ineffective special effects. This isn't a big budgeted special effects film, so why lean into that? And you have interesting ideas that this delves into, like her relationship with Robin, played by Natiza Williams, who was her lover, and she never really got to be with her in the way that she wanted to be because pressures from her parents and society. You have a relationship with Clive Davis, who Stanley Tucci's fantastic in this, and he's such a wonderful and supportive character here, you know, because this is produced by Clive Davis, so there's probably not a whole lot of gray area they're going to dig into in that relationship. I think Ashton Sanders does a really good job as Bobby Brown, but I feel like they skate over a lot of what went on in that marriage. There's like highlighted moments that they focus on things, and it's just like, there's one moment where he puts his hands on her, and it's like, oh, well, he's abusive, but like, you don't see that. And like, a scene later, she's all hugging and kissing all over him, and just like, there's not enough time to breathe for so many of the things that this film is trying to tackle, despite the fact that this film is 2.5 hours. And you have the relationship with her parents. I think Tamara Tooney is fantastic as Cissy Houston. I would think she would earn herself a Best Supporting Actress nod. I thought she was fantastic, and her dynamic was really strong with Ackie on screen. You had Clark Peters, who played her father, and there's a lot of tension there in terms of who's controlling Whitney and her enterprises and her business. It's just, there's so many beats that you've seen in biopics before, especially music biopics, and this hits all of them. in the exact same ways you expect them to, in the exact same ways we've seen 50 times before, and never really done in an interesting or dynamic way. And there's specific scenes that are so staged and awkward, like I hated the Super Bowl scene, because then it kept cutting to these like families in the most awkward situations and saying the most awkward dialogue, and it just felt so artificial and fake and staged, and just took me completely out of the film. And there's multiple moments like that throughout this film. I don't even think they dove deep enough into the drug use and really set that up in a more concrete way earlier in the film. Because she makes such a big deal that it's like, oh, this has been a thing long before you, Bobby. And it's like, has it? I don't really, like, they only, like, subtly hinted at, like, tiny little things where it's just like, this seems like, and like she makes a comment like, all of your favorite performances, Clive, I've needed a little help, and it's just like, oh, well, didn't really get that vibe on any of that. And I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities and holes throughout this script, and I feel bad because there's energy, there's strong performances, it's just, you're one of your most run-of-the-mill biopics, but unfortunately some things that kind of anchor it and bog it down and take away from the enjoyment of the experience. And this is 2.5 hours. You really have to be engaged throughout, and this struggles to keep your engagement. But those are my thoughts on Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some movies. By the way, song, that gets an A+. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.